Right. So we're back for another deep dive, and today things are going to get a little heavy.
Yeah.
We're talking COVID origins and the role of some pretty key figures, Dr.
Mm.
Fauci in particular.
Yeah, definitely a lot to unpack there.
You guys have sent us some really interesting sources this time around.
Yeah.
We've got a Chinese language piece, and it's bringing up some pretty serious accusations about Dr. Fauci.
Hmm.
Also, some news about Trump and what he was doing with NIH funding.
Right.
And then even reports that like UK and India, they're kind of shifting their stance on how the pandemic even began.
Yeah, it seems like things are really starting to shift.
It's huge, right? This
Yeah.
can have major implications.
Oh, absolutely.
We could be looking at impacts on international relations,
For sure.
scientific research, even the possibility of like financial reparations,
Yeah, the financial side of things is huge. That's
Ah.
something that I don't think a lot of people have really considered yet.
Right. This is a big deal.
Yeah.
So let's dive in. Let's try to untangle all this stuff. We've got accusations. We've got conflicting stories. It's a lot.
Yeah, and it's going to be tough separating fact from fiction here.
Oh, for sure, especially in such a politically charged environment.
Yeah, you said it.
Okay, so first up, this Chinese language source.
Okay.
Some pretty explosive claims about Dr. Fauci in here.
Yeah, what are they saying?
Allegations that he actually received money from the Chinese Communist Party
Mm-hmm.
and that he was involved in some kind of cover-up.
A cover-up.
Yeah, related to that Wuhan lab.
Wow, that's a serious accusation.
Huge, right. And it's not just coming from this one source.
No.
We've got like 19 U.S. state attorneys general, and they're launching investigations into Fauci too.
So there's definitely some momentum building here.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are these attorneys general specifically focused on?
Well, they're accusing him of a bunch of stuff. Mismanagement of funds at the NIH,
Oh, wow.
misleading statements to Congress, suppressing scientific debate, like a whole range of offenses.
It's interesting, though, right? Because Biden pardoned Fauci at the federal level?
Yeah.
So are these state-level investigations even going to go anywhere?
Well, that's what they're trying to figure out. They're arguing that a pardon doesn't automatically protect him from state charges.
Oh, okay.
And they're pointing to this House subcommittee report.
This is the one on the origins of COVID.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're saying it basically backs up their case against Fauci.
So potentially a wider network of people involved then.
It's starting to look that way. And you know that Chinese source, it goes even further.
Oh.
It actually suggests that maybe Fauci is like a scapegoat.
Like a fall guy.
Yeah, in some bigger scheme.
Mm.
And they're pointing the finger at the CCP, saying they orchestrated the whole thing.
Wow, that's a whole other level of conspiracy.
Right.
It's hard to know what to make of that.
Yeah. I mean, we have to consider all the angles.
All right, absolutely.
But no matter what the motivations are here, these investigations, they could unearth some really uncomfortable truths.
Yeah, there's a lot of potential here for things to get messy.
How research funding works, how scientific research is done,
Right.
even how information is shared or not shared,
The suppression of information, yeah, that's a huge concern.
And it's not all about Fauci either.
Okay.
This Chinese source, they call out the EcoHealth Alliance.
And they're funding on the Wuhan lab, right?
Exactly.
I've heard a lot about that.
Allegations that U.S. funds were going through EcoHealth straight to that lab.
Interesting.
And that the research, it was, well, some scientists considered it pretty risky.
This is where that gain-of-function research comes in, right?
Yeah, that's a big part of it.
Modifying viruses to make them more transmissible or even more deadly.
That's right.
The idea is to understand and prevent pandemics, but it's inherently risky.
And the attorneys general, they're saying Fauci wasn't straight with Congress about how much oversight the NIH really had over that kind of research at the Wuhan lab.
If that's true, that's a huge problem.
Transparency, accountability, this goes way beyond the U.S.
This could have implications for the entire global scientific community.
Yeah, and then you add in those accusations about suppressing scientific debate, especially about vaccine risks. They're saying he was part of silencing dissenting voices,
Wow. If that's proven true, that's a serious blow to public trust in science.
And health institutions, yeah.
Yeah, it makes you wonder who to believe anymore.
It feels like we're seeing this major crisis of confidence play out,
Definitely. And not just in the U.S. either. It's global.
On one hand, you've got these accusations against Fauci and these investigations into research funding.
Right.
And on the other, you've got countries like the UK and India, and they're reconsidering their stance on the whole origin of COVID.
Like they're leaning more towards the lab leak theory now.
That's what it sounds like.
That could be huge, you know?
Yeah.
If more countries start to think that way, the pressure on China is just going to keep mounting.
To be more transparent
Yeah.
about what happened at that Wuhan Institute of Virology.
Exactly.
And then there's the financial aspect.
Oh, yeah. The money.
If it turns out China was responsible in some way,
Either through negligence or even worse, deliberate action.
the financial reparations, they could be astronomical.
We could be talking trillions of dollars.
Individuals, businesses, whole countries.
It's hard to even wrap your head around the impact that would have.
It would be a complete reshaping of the global landscape.
Economically, geopolitically, everything.
Imagine China being held financially liable for a pandemic that caused so much death and economic devastation.
Unprecedented.
It goes beyond just the money, right? This impacts the future of scientific research, of international collaboration.
If there's even a hint of a cover-up.
Or lack of transparency.
Yeah.
It erodes trust.
Absolutely.
It makes it way harder for scientists from different countries to even work together.
And we need that collaboration, especially for global problems like pandemics, like climate change.
Right. It's this delicate balance.
We need to work together, but trust is essential.
And these investigations, these shifting stories, they're really shaking the foundation of that trust.
It's a lot to process.
Okay, so let's recap. We've got serious allegations against Fauci, potential legal battles, a global reassessment of how the pandemic started,
Right.
and this looming possibility of huge financial reparations.
It's a complicated story, and it's changing all the time.
We're just scratching the surface here.
And what's so fascinating to me is that this isn't just a science story or a political story.
Right.
It's a human story.
Yeah.
Ambition, secrecy, the pursuit of power, it's all there.
It really makes you think about accountability, about transparency, about the search for truth in a world where information is almost like a weapon.
It's a lot to unpack, that's for sure. You know, you mentioned ambition before.
Mm-hmm.
That really stands out to me in all of this.
Yeah.
These accusations against Fauci, I mean, they paint this picture of someone whose judgment maybe got clouded by personal ambition, you know, whether it's for recognition, influence, or even financial gain.
It's interesting how you bring that up, right?
Yeah.
Because we think about science as this pure pursuit of knowledge.
Right, exactly.
But scientists are human too.
Of course.
They have temptations, pressures, just like everyone else.
And when you're dealing with something like gain-of-function research,
Oh, yeah.
the stakes are so high.
They're enormous.
And that can lead to situations where ethical boundaries start to get blurred. It's a reminder that science isn't immune to corruption or abuse of power.
Like any other human endeavor.
Exactly.
And speaking of power, we haven't really touched on Trump's decision to freeze that NIH funding.
Oh, yeah, that was a big move.
What was the context there? Like, how does it fit into all of this?
Well, I think it was part of his broader goal of shrinking the federal government.
Right.
But it also showed his skepticism of scientific institutions and experts.
Remember, this was right in the middle of the pandemic.
Yeah.
There was so much debate about what to do.
Everyone had a different opinion.
And Trump and Fauci, they clashed a lot, didn't they?
Oh, they definitely butted heads.
So maybe freezing the NIH funding was Trump's way of kind of asserting control.
Yeah, pushing back against what he saw as an overreaching scientific establishment.
It sounds like there were a lot of layers to that decision.
Definitely political, ideological, maybe even personal.
But how much did it actually affect research? Like, did it have a real impact?
It's hard to say for sure, but any disruption in funding, it can have a domino effect, especially on long-term projects.
Scientists having to scale back their work or delay things or even abandon whole lines of research.
It's certainly possible.
And that brings us back to this question of accountability. If these allegations against Fauci are true, and if it shows a bigger pattern of reckless research,
then it's not just about holding individuals responsible, is it?
no, we have to look at the systems too.
It's the structures that allowed this to happen.
Right. Do we have the right safeguards in place?
Are the funding agencies really doing their job overseeing all this?
Those are some big questions.
And they're not just relevant in the U.S. either.
Right. With the UK and India maybe taking the lab leak theory more seriously, This could lead to a global reassessment of how we do things.
Of biosafety standards, research ethics.
Exactly. The pandemic really exposed those vulnerabilities.
Oh, absolutely.
We have to learn from that, right? We need to make our system stronger.
So we can prevent this kind of thing from happening again.
And that's not just about scientific research. It's surveillance, early warning systems, all of it.
Yeah, global cooperation is key.
So it's fascinating to see how this started with those accusations against Fauci.
Right.
And now we're having this much broader conversation.
About the scientific community, the role of government, transparency, accountability.
It's global.
And it's essential, right? This isn't about pointing fingers. It's about understanding what happened and preventing it from happening again.
And realizing that scientific progress isn't always a straight line.
Yeah.
There are risks, there are ethical dilemmas, there are unintended consequences.
And as we keep pushing the boundaries of science,
We need to be really careful.
we need to have safeguards in place.
Absolutely.
It's a balancing act for sure.
So much to think about. We went from financial mismanagement to potential lawsuits to rethinking how we do science entirely.
And it's still unfolding. We're not at the end of the story.
Not even close.
As more information comes out, we're going to have to be ready to adjust our understanding.
To keep asking those tough questions.
Yeah, because this is going to have implications for years to come.
Decades, maybe.
And the media, they're going to play a huge role in all of this.
Oh, yeah. Shaping public perception, influencing policy.
They have a responsibility to report accurately, fairly, without sensationalizing things.
And to give context.
Yeah.
To help people understand the science and the politics.
That's a lot to ask.
And for us, for everyone listening, we need to be critical thinkers.
We can't just passively absorb whatever we see.
We have to evaluate sources, consider different perspectives, be wary of those biases.
It's so important in this age of information overload.
Everything's moving so fast.
It's easy to get caught up in headlines or what's trending on social media.
But we need to be discerning.
We need to separate fact from fiction, identify bias, check the credibility of sources.
And be willing to talk to people who disagree with us.
Respectfully, of course.
Yeah, that's key, especially with something like this.
COVID origins, it's emotional. It's easy to just seek out information that confirms what we already believe.
So how do we avoid that trap? How do we make sure we're being open-minded?
Well, I think the first step is recognizing our own biases.
Oh, yeah.
We all have them. And it's crucial to be aware of how they might be influencing us.
That's a good point.
And we have to be humble, right?
Mm-hmm.
Admit that we don't have all the answers.
Yeah.
This is a complex situation. There's a lot we still don't know.
Absolutely.
And it's okay to say, I don't know, or I need more information.
Right.
That's a sign of intellectual honesty.
A willingness to learn.
Exactly.
And remembering that finding the truth is an ongoing process.
Yeah.
It's not about reaching some final conclusion and then closing our minds.
It's about being open to new evidence, changing our minds if we need to, and always asking more questions.
It's wild, right? We started with these specific accusations against Fauci, and now we're talking about, like, the nature of truth itself.
Right. It's amazing how these things evolve. You start digging into one specific thing, and suddenly you're grappling with these huge, like, philosophical questions.
It makes you realize how important it is to be really careful about the information we consume.
Especially these days.
Especially from the media. You were talking about how the media shapes public perception. And, man, we've seen that in action with this whole pandemic.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about how fragmented the media landscape is now.
Right.
And then you add in social media.
Like a wildfire.
Misinformation, biased narratives. It spreads so fast.
It's tough to keep up.
We've seen it with everything. The origins of the virus, masks, vaccines.
Yeah, it's like everyone's fighting for attention.
And the stories that get the most attention, they're not always the most accurate.
It's the sensational stuff, the stuff that triggers our emotions.
Exactly. And that makes it so hard to be truly informed.
It's not enough to just glance at headlines anymore.
No, you got to dig deeper, look for different viewpoints, check your sources.
And what about experts? I mean, we've seen scientists and public health officials contradicting each other.
It's confusing, right? Like, who do you believe?
Especially when it's about our health, our safety.
Well, I think the key is to remember that science is a process. It's not about being right or wrong all the time.
It's about constantly learning, evolving.
Exactly. Scientists are always gathering new data, revising their understanding. That's how it's supposed to work.
So it makes sense that there would be disagreements, especially with a new virus like COVID.
Yeah, there's a lot we still don't know.
But how do we make sense of those debates? Like, as regular people, how do we even know who to trust?
I I don't think it's about finding one expert and just believing everything they say.
Okay.
It's about learning to evaluate information for yourself
So looking for sources that are transparent,
about their methods, their funding.
that admit when they're not sure about something,
Yeah, and that are willing to consider other perspectives.
and be careful of anyone who claims to have all the answers, right?
Yeah, anytime someone says they have the exclusive truth,
Red flag.
big red flag. Because the truth is usually complicated.
It's messy.
There's nuance, there are gray areas.
Which brings us back to that idea of humility.
Knowing that we don't know everything.
Being okay with saying, I don't know.
Yeah, and being open to changing our minds when new information comes along.
You know, it's kind of amazing how this deep dive started with these accusations, and now we're talking about like the nature of knowledge itself.
That's the journey, right? It's not just about the destination, it's about everything you learn along the way.
It's about how we think,
Right.
how we process information, how we form our understanding of the world.
And this whole pandemic, it's been a crash course in all of that.
It's definitely exposed some weaknesses,
In our systems, in our thinking.
but it's also forced us to have these really important conversations.
And that's a good thing, even if it came from a really difficult place.
So we've got these investigations. It's a potential for global change, this whole rethinking of how we approach science and information.
Yeah, it's a lot.
But I'm feeling cautiously optimistic.
Me too.
Like, we can learn from this.
We can make things better.
We can be more informed, more engaged.
We have to be.
This story isn't over. Not by a long shot.
But I think it's showing us a path forward.
A path towards a more transparent, a more accountable future.
And that's a future worth fighting for.
Absolutely. Well, that's about all the time we have for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Keep asking those questions, keep digging for the truth, and most importantly, keep those minds open.
See you next time.